Venice is a city in northeastern Italy and the capital of the Veneto region. It is built on a group of 126 islands that are separated by expanses of open water and by canals. Portions of the city are linked by 472 bridges. The islands are in the shallow Venetian lagoon, an enclosed bay lying between the mouths of the Po and the Piave rivers. In 2020, around 258,685 people resided in Greater Venice or the Commune di Venezia, of whom around 51,000 live in the historical island city of Venice and the rest on the mainland, together with the cities of Padua and Treviso. Venice is included in the Padua-Treviso-Venice metropolitan area, which is considered a statistical metropolitan area, with a total population of 2.6 million. The name is derived from the ancient Veneti people who inhabited the region by the 10th century BC. The city was historically the capital of the Republic of Venice for almost a millennium, from 810 to 1797. It was a major financial and maritime power during the Middle Ages and Renaissance, and a staging area for the Crusades and the Battle of Lepanto, as well as an important center of commerce, especially silk, grain, and spice, and of art from the 13th century to the end of the 17th. The city-state of Venice is considered to have been the first real international financial center, emerging in the 9th century and reaching its greatest prominence in the 14th century. This made Venice a wealthy city throughout most of its history. For centuries, Venice possessed numerous territories along the Adriatic Sea and within the Italian peninsula, leaving a significant impact on the architecture and culture that can still be seen today. The Venetian arsenal is considered by several historians to be the first factory in history and was the base of Venice's naval power. The sovereignty of Venice came to an end in 1797 at the hands of Napoleon. Subsequently, in 1866, the city became part of the Kingdom of Italy. Venice has been known as La Dominante, La Serenissima, Queen of the Adriatic, City of Water, City of Masks, City of Bridges, the Floating City, and City of Canals. In the 21st century, Venice remains a very popular tourist destination, a major cultural center, and has often been ranked one of the most beautiful cities in the world. Has been described by the Times as one of Europe's most romantic cities and by the New York Times as undoubtedly the most beautiful city built by man. However, the city faces challenges including an excessive number of tourists, pollution, tide peaks, and cruise ships sailing too close to buildings. Venice is an important destination for tourists who want to see its celebrated art and architecture. The city hosts up to 60,000 tourists per day, 2017 estimate. Estimates of the annual number of tourists vary from 22 million to 30 million, 113, 114, 115. This over-tourism creates overcrowding and environmental problems for Venice's ecosystem. By 2017, UNESCO was considering the addition of Venice to its in danger list, which includes historical ruins in war-torn countries. To reduce the number of visitors who are causing irreversible changes in Venice, the agency supports limiting the number of cruise ships, 116, 117, as well as implementing a strategy for more sustainable tourism. Tourism has been a major part of the Venetian economy since the 18th century, when Venice, with its beautiful cityscape, uniqueness, and rich musical and artistic cultural heritage, was a stop on the Grand Tour. In the 19th century, Venice became a fashionable center for the rich and famous, who often stayed and dined at luxury establishments such as the Danieli Hotel and the Café Florian, and continued to be a fashionable city into the early 20th century. In the 1980s, the Carnival of Venice was revived, and the city has become a major center of international conferences and festivals, such as the prestigious Venice Biennale and the Venice Film Festival, which attract visitors from all over the world for their theatrical, cultural, cinematic, artistic, and musical productions. Today, there are numerous attractions in Venice, such as St. Mark's Basilica, the Doge's Palace, the Grand Canal, and the Piazza San Marco. The Lido di Venezia is also a popular international luxury destination, attracting thousands of actors, critics, celebrities, and others in the cinematic industry. The city also relies heavily on the cruise business. The Cruise Venice Committee has estimated that cruise ship passengers spend more than €150 million annually in the city, according to a 2015 report. Other reports, however, point out that such day trippers spend relatively little in the few hours of their visits to the city. Venice is regarded by some as a tourist trap and by others as a living museum. Although no surviving historical records deal directly with the founding or building of Venice, tradition and the available evidence have led several historians to agree that the original population of Venice consisted of refugees from nearby Roman cities such as Patavium Aquileia, Tarvisium Altinum, and Concordia, as well as from the undefended countryside who were fleeing successive waves of Germanic and Hun invasions. This is further supported by the documentation on the so-called apostolic families, the 12 founding families of Venice who elected the first doge, who in most cases trace their lineage back to Roman families. Some late Roman sources reveal the existence of fishermen on the islands in the original marshy lagoons, who were referred to as Incoli Lacuni. The traditional founding is identified with the dedication of the first church, that of San Giacomo on the islet of Rialto. Beginning as early as AD 166 to 168, the Quadi and Marcomanni destroyed the main Roman town in the area, present-day Oderzo. This part of Roman Italy was again overrun in the early 5th century by the Visigoths and, some 50 years later, by the Huns led by Attila. The last and most enduring immigration into the north of the Italian peninsula, that of the Lombards in 568, left the Eastern Roman Empire only a small strip of coastline in the current Veneto, including Venice. The Roman/Byzantine territory was organized as the Exarchate of Ravenna, administered from that ancient port and overseen by a viceroy, the Exarch, appointed by the emperor in Constantinople. Ravenna and Venice were connected only by sea routes, and with the Venetians' isolation came increasing autonomy. New ports were built, including those at Malamocco and Torcello in the Venetian lagoon. The Tribuni Myers formed the earliest central standing governing committee of the islands in the lagoon, dating from c. 568. Traditional first doge of Venice, Paolo Lucio Anafesto, was elected in 697, as written in the oldest chronicle by John, Deacon of Venice c. 1008. Some modern historians claim Paolo Lucio Anafesto was actually the Exarch Paul, and Paul's successor, Marcello Tegliano, was Paul's Magister Militum, literally, Master of Soldiers. In 726, the soldiers and citizens of the Exarchate rose in a rebellion over the iconoclastic controversy at the urging of Pope Gregory II. The Exarch, held responsible for the acts of his master, Byzantine Emperor Leo III, was murdered, and many officials were put to flight in the chaos. At about this time, the people of the lagoon elected their own independent leader for the first time, although the relationship of this to the uprisings is not clear. Ursus was the first of 117 doges, is the Venetian dialectal equivalent of the Latin dux. The corresponding word in English is duke, in Standard Italian duco. Whatever his original views, Ursus supported Emperor Leo III's successful military expedition to recover Ravenna, sending both men and ships. In recognition of this, Venice was granted numerous privileges and concessions, and Ursus, who had personally taken the field, was confirmed by Leo as dux and given the added title of Hypatus. In 751, the Lombard king Aistulf conquered most of the Exarchate of Ravenna, leaving Venice a lonely and increasingly autonomous Byzantine outpost. During this period, the seat of the local Byzantine governor was at Malamaco. Settlement on the islands in the lagoon probably increased with the Lombard conquest of other Byzantine territories, as refugees sought asylum in the area. In 775 of 6, the episcopal seat of Olivolo was created. During the reign of Duke Agnello Particiaco, 811 to 827, the ducal seat moved from Malamaco to the more protected Rialto, within present-day Venice. The monastery of St. Zachary and the first ducal palace and basilica of St. Mark, as well as a walled defense between Olivolo and Rialto, were subsequently built here. Charlemagne sought to subdue the city to his rule. He ordered the Pope to expel the Venetians from the Pentapolis along the Adriatic coast. Charlemagne's own son Pepin of Italy, king of the Lombards, under the authority of his father, embarked on a siege of Venice itself. This, however, proved a costly failure. The siege lasted 6 months, with Pepin's army ravaged by the diseases of the local swamps and eventually forced to withdraw in 810. A few months later, Pepin himself died, apparently as a result of a disease contracted there. In the aftermath, an agreement between Charlemagne and the Byzantine Emperor Nicephorus in 814 recognized Venice as Byzantine territory and granted the city trading rights along the Adriatic coast. In 828, the new city's prestige increased with the acquisition, from Alexandria, of relics claimed to be of Saint Mark the Evangelist. These were placed in the new basilica. Winged lions, visible throughout Venice, are the emblem of Saint Mark. The patriarchal seat was also moved to Rialto. As the community continued to develop, and as Byzantine power waned, its own autonomy grew, leading to eventual independence. From the 9th to the 12th centuries, Venice developed into a powerful maritime empire. In addition to Venice, there were 7 others. The most important ones were Genoa, Pisa, and Amalfi, and the lesser-known were Ragusa, Ancona, Gaeta, and Noli. Its own strategic position at the head of the Adriatic made Venetian naval and commercial power almost invulnerable. With the elimination of pirates along the Dalmatian coast, the city became a flourishing trade center between Western Europe and the rest of the world, especially with the Byzantine Empire and Asia, where its navy protected sea routes against piracy. The Republic of Venice seized a number of places on the eastern shores of the Adriatic before 1200, mostly for commercial reasons, because pirates based there were a menace to trade. The Doge already possessed the titles of Duke of Dalmatia and Duke of Istria. Later mainland possessions, which extended across Lake Garda as far west as the Adda River, were known as the terra firma. They were acquired partly as a buffer against belligerent neighbors, partly to guarantee alpine trade routes, and partly to ensure the supply of mainland wheat, on which the city depended. In building its maritime commercial empire, Venice dominated the trade in salt, acquired control of most of the islands in the Aegean, including Crete and Cyprus in the Mediterranean, and became a major power broker in the Near East. By the standards of the time, Venice's stewardship of its mainland territories was relatively enlightened, and the citizens of such towns as Bergamo, Brescia, and Verona rallied to the defense of Venetian sovereignty when it was threatened by invaders. Venice remained closely associated with Constantinople, being twice granted trading privileges in the Eastern Roman Empire through the so-called Golden Bulls or Chrysobuls, in return for aiding the Eastern Empire to resist Norman and Turkish incursions. In the first Chrysobule, Venice acknowledged its homage to the empire, but not in the second, reflecting the decline of Byzantium and the rise of Venice's power. Venice became an imperial power following the Fourth Crusade, which, having veered off course, culminated in 1204 by capturing and sacking Constantinople and establishing the Latin Empire. As a result of this conquest, considerable Byzantine plunder was brought back to Venice. This plunder included the gilt bronze horses from the Hippodrome of Constantinople, which were originally placed above the entrance to the Cathedral of Venice, St. Mark's Basilica. After the fall of Constantinople, the former Eastern Roman Empire was partitioned among the Latin Crusaders and the Venetians. Venice subsequently carved out a sphere of influence in the Mediterranean known as the Duchy of the Archipelago and captured Crete. The seizure of Constantinople proved as decisive a factor in ending the Byzantine Empire as the loss of the Anatolian themes after Manzikert. Although the Byzantines recovered control of the ravaged city a half-century later, the Byzantine Empire was terminally weakened and existed as a ghost of its old self until Sultan Mehmet the Conqueror took the city in 1453. Situated on the Adriatic Sea, Venice had always traded extensively with the Byzantine Empire and the Middle East. By the late 13th century,